Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, June the 4th, 2024. Today I want to talk about presidential sons, in particular Hunter Biden and Barron Trump. Now, I did talk about Barron Trump a few days ago, but I didn't really talk about him in great detail, and I felt there was a lot I missed out, and I do want to have another look at his horoscope. There are some interesting things, and I think there are some interesting relations astrologically between him and his father. And also I want to consider Hunter Biden. So I believe his trial starts today, or at least the jury selection bit. Now, Hunter Biden has got into trouble because of what he said in this declaration you have to make when you buy a firearm. So if you don't know, if in America, from a European perspective, it's all very strange. Coming to the US and seeing the availability of firearms, it just does seem kind of weird from a European perspective. I'm not being judgmental here. I'm just giving my immediate reaction there. But if you want to buy a firearm, you have to make this declaration, and you have to say certain things, and you have to say that, for example, you are not a felon, and you also have to say that you're not, I think something like you're not taking drugs, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what your state says. So, for example, I think if you're taking marijuana and you're in a state where marijuana is legal, like this state, Washington State, I think you still have to indicate this. And if you are a drug user, and if you are a felon, or both, you're not going to be allowed to buy the gun. So you hand in, I believe you hand in this form where you're buying the gun, and they process it, or they send it to the FBI and so forth. So Hunter Biden said that he wasn't taking drugs or wasn't addicted to drugs or whatever it asks on the form, and apparently he was lying, and that's what this current trial that he's about to, that's just starting, is all about. Now, one issue when we're talking about Barron Trump and Hunter Biden, I mean, it's Barron Trump, I really want to look at the connection between him and his father, but in general, there is an issue that sometimes comes up about the father and the mother in astrology. Now, in standard Western astrology, I'm not talking about classical astrology, I'm talking about sort of modern Western astrology, going back to certainly William Lilly, writing in the 17th century. The fourth house is taken as the father, and the 10th house is taken as the mother. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, and I know that some people in the comments section do question that. No, they say that the 10th house is the father. I mean, I suppose you can see why the 10th house might be the father, because you see father as being the man who has the career, who is out there being successful, and the mother stays at home. So you could say, in some respects, that makes sense from a sort of traditional perspective. But I think if you look at it at a sort of deeper psychological sense, it does make more sense for the father to be the fourth house. The child, as it when it's young, the association is with the mother. And there was, when I was doing a course in social psychology a long time ago, they were looking, I had to read, or I was supposed to read, this book about voting choices, and there was this analysis, I don't know, it was done in the 50s, or was it 40s, 50s, a long time ago, but this was supposedly one of the required reading in this social psychology course, and the question is, what influences voting? And they looked at this survey, looked at all sorts of stuff, and apparently the nearest they could come to a factor influencing voting was how your mother voted. Not how your father voted, but how your mother voted. And I thought that was interesting. Also, in terms of the father, when you're born, your father does not have to be around. Your father can be dead when you're born. Your mother, generally speaking, does have to be around when you're born. Okay, you can have sort of Brave New World scenarios and so forth. And so the father can be hidden. And the mother, there's less scope for the mother to have to be hidden at birth, because she does have to be alive. So I think there is some kind of logic for that. And the father perhaps represents your deep inheritance, what goes really goes back a long way, but it could be buried, where I think the mother may be more obvious and she may be more out there. And I think for most children, the mother is the person that is their first contact with society. At least that's a view. But anyway, in modern Western astrology, I believe most astrologers go for the mother as being the 10th house. In the West, of course, must make that clear, in the West. I think if you look at al-Biruni, who was, when was he writing? Oh God, the 11th century, I think. So had a quick look at al-Biruni. I believe al-Biruni just sees the 4th house as just representing parents and family in general. And I think that might be more of an approach in classical astrology, Hellenistic astrology. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not saying that's the case. So some of you, I'm sure, know more about Hellenistic astrology than me, and you might be able to correct me on that matter. But in terms of my astrology, except when I'm using Hindu astrology, I think Hindu astrology, 4th house is the mother, 9th house is the father, I think. That's one approach. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. But in terms of the standard Western astrology I practice, I take the 4th house as the father and the 10th house as the mother. Okay, before I talk about these two presidential sons, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, June 4th, 2024. And there aren't that many aspects, but those aspects there are quite significant. So let's start off by looking at this chart for today, set for noon. Moon remains in Taurus at noon, New York. Moon is at 20 degrees Taurus. As I said yesterday, Taurus is a good sign for the moon to be in. It's in its exaltation, and it's a sign that is very down to earth, and it's focusing on reality, but there can be a luxury-loving side to Moon in Taurus. Now, the disciplined aspect to Moon in Taurus is particularly seen today because the Moon is sextile Saturn. So Moon sextile Saturn is very grounded, and it can be responsible, and it can be disciplined, but not boring, because the Moon is also making a conjunction to Uranus. I think the Moon's conjunction to Uranus may, to an extent, be moderated by that sextile to Saturn. By that sextile to Saturn. But Moon conjunct Uranus can create a little bit of excitement. Perhaps at an emotional level, we want things to happen. There's a certain impatience there. Plus, Moon conjunct Uranus can be a little bit stubborn. We have our own way of rebelling, and we are not going to compromise. And this is the way it is. Though, we do have stuff in Gemini. We've got a lot of stuff in Gemini. We've got 4 planets in Gemini. Jupiter in Gemini, Mercury in Gemini, Sun in Gemini, Venus in Gemini. And we have got 2 conjunctions today, which in a way is quite exceptional. We have got Mercury conjunct Jupiter, and we have got Sun conjunct Venus. Now, the Sun conjunct Venus it's by definition is cazimi. The Sun and Venus are in exactly the same place. And as I discussed yesterday, you have various aspects relating to a planet being close to the sun. And as it gets closer to the sun, the definition changes. So looking at William Lilly in Christian Astrology, he describes 3 states in which a planet can have in relationship to the sun. As it starts to get close to the sun, I think he said something like 18 degrees, a planet is under sunbeams. That means it's starting to get weakened by the sun. As it gets to within 8 degrees, it becomes combust. That means the planet is seriously weakened by the sun. You know, when a planet is under sunbeams, it loses a couple of points. When it's under combustion, I think he's calling it a system. It's 5 points, or was it 4 points? 4 or 5 points gets lost. But then, when it gets really close to the sun, like I think within 17 arc minutes, it becomes cazimi, and all of a sudden the planet becomes strong. And as I said yesterday, it's because I think that the sun and the planet are on the same wavelength. And when you're on the same wavelength of something, it's not going to destroy you. It's actually going to strengthen you. And the 2 planets, Sun and Venus, are potentially going to strengthen each other. So with this Sun-Venus cazimi conjunction today, I mean, I'm not saying for sure whether it's good or bad. There's a bit of controversy about it. You could say that it's super combust, that it's totally burnt up. On the other hand, from a cazimi perspective, you could say that Venus is really strengthened. It has a moment of strength, and we can perhaps take advantage of it. Now, at the same time, Mercury is conjunct Jupiter. I would have said that Mercury conjunct Jupiter is a pretty good aspect to Gemini. Okay, you have a situation where Mercury is very strong in Gemini. Jupiter is in its detriment in Gemini. So one is weak, one is strong by sign, but still, when you've got Mercury conjunct Jupiter, it does mean we've got a lot to say. In many cases, we've got a lot of fun things to say, though perhaps with Jupiter in Gemini, just remember, we might not always get it right. We might say too much. So don't say more than you have to today. Though I think if you exercise a little bit of discipline, which should be possible with Moon sextile Saturn. Remember, the Moon is a communication planet, as I keep saying, almost perhaps to the point of getting boring, but the Moon is a communication planet. It is sextile Saturn, so perhaps the Moon sextile Saturn is going to restrain Mercury conjunct Jupiter a little bit. But we can have some good ideas. We just have to make sure that we streamline those ideas, and we mustn't naturally assume that those ideas are good ideas on their own. We perhaps need to do some work on them. So we do have these 2 conjunctions. I think that does make it quite a powerful day. And one interesting thing about this conjunction, because we've got 2 conjunctions, we can actually see a midpoint configuration coming in. So you can see Mercury, this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction is at 2 Gemini. This Sun-Venus conjunction is at 14 Gemini. So that it means it's 12 degrees apart. So if we add 6 degrees to that, we find that the midpoint of those 2 conjunctions is 8 degrees Gemini. And, I personally find that really interesting because my sun is at 8 degrees Gemini. And so today I've got 2 midpoints. I've got the Venus-Jupiter midpoint and the Sun-Mercury midpoint hitting my sun. So, if you're born around May the 30th, do report back. How does it feel? It should be quite an important time, I suppose, maybe. Of course, you notice these things astrologically and you get excited about them and then nothing happens. So I thought I'd just point that out. Now, we can actually see that midpoint using a dial, just to show you what I mean. So here's the 90-degree dial, and let me just show you that, you see, there is see on the dial, you can see there is the Sun-Venus conjunction, and there is the Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, and there is a planet on the midpoint, and that is Zeus. The hypothetical planet Zeus today is on the midpoint between the Sun-Venus conjunction and the Mercury-Jupiter midpoint. So Zeus is right there. So Zeus can represent exciting events, big things happening out of the blue, perhaps, the exercise of power, perhaps, but it can be very fortunate. I just want to just quickly read you what Witte says in his Rules for Planetary Pictures about Zeus on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. I'm not saying this is going to happen, I'm just doing this for fun, just to see what he says. Zeus on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, he says it is realization of a desire, lucky attainment of an aim, the wish or will to create happiness, longing for peace, longing for family increase. So that's pretty fortunate, according to Witte. And then also Zeus on the Sun-Mercury midpoint. So Zeus on the Sun-Mercury midpoint. Zeus on the Sun-Mercury midpoint would be to be mentally methodical, purposeful and commanding, to make a proposal, to wish to put something into action. So you can see a great deal of dynamism there with those two conjunctions put together. Though we should not forget that Zeus does have a relationship with firearms and explosives. And so you have to be a little bit careful there. You maybe would not want to be in a war zone with Zeus on that midpoint. But overall, for ordinary people, not in a war zone, people who are not playing around with guns and explosives, I would have thought the Zeus hitting those two conjunctions should be pretty fortunate. And I think overall those two conjunctions are pretty fortunate. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, remember, if we've got Sun-Venus conjunction, that means we're going to have an Earth-Venus opposition, and I think of course we've been monitoring the Earth-Venus opposition as it forms. So here it is. There you see, there's Earth, and there is Venus, and they are in opposition. Now, that does give a different view of Sun-Venus. So looking at it from the Earth's perspective, we have got into this Sun-Venus conjunction. It's cazimi, and it looks good. From a heliocentric perspective, it's perhaps not so optimistic because Earth is opposition Venus. So you imagine you've got the Sun, and Earth and Venus are on completely opposite sides of the Sun. So if you wanted to travel from Earth to Venus, it's going to take a long time. Okay, it depends on how fast your rocket is going. But if you were going to travel instantaneously, they're a long way apart, Earth and Venus. And we also have Saturn square Earth and Saturn square Venus. Now that square between the Earth and Saturn and Venus and Saturn is losing its intensity, but still Venus and Earth are square Saturn, and that could put a damper on proceedings. And yes, it's nice, this Sun-Venus conjunction, cazimi conjunction, but how good is it going to be for relationships when we consider the fact that geocentrically Venus is square Saturn? I think there may be times when it may be difficult to relate. It may not be quite as free-flowing emotionally, particularly on a societal level, as we would like, but because of this Venus square Saturn. Also, today we have got Mars sextile Uranus heliocentrically. We had Mars sextile Uranus heliocentric yesterday, but we've got it again today. It's about action. We can be very active. We can make things happen. It sort of echoes what I was saying about this hypothetical planet Zeus being on the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, Jupiter midpoint. We might have a strong sense of wanting things to happen, being quite desirous of things happening, and so that might be how Mars sextile Uranus is working. But we have to be careful how we go. We don't want to overdo it. Notice also heliocentrically, Jupiter is about to move into Gemini. I know it's already moved into Gemini geocentrically, but it is about to move into Gemini heliocentrically, where it will make the Jupiter-Pluto trine. Now, that is one thing I did forget to say about the geocentric picture, is that geocentrically there is today Mercury is trine Pluto, and so Mercury-Pluto, it can be about how we communicate, how we persuade. And don't forget, Mercury is happening at the same time as Jupiter is trine Pluto. So we had Jupiter trine Pluto yesterday. Now Mercury is picking up on that. So with that Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, it is about communication. We can be very persuasive, we can be manipulative, and we can make people see things our way. And like yesterday, we're going to have a great desire for self-improvement. So if you're not happy with the way things are, then consider the possibility that you can actually make some changes. Anyway, that's the picture today. I think there are some very important aspects today which are going to, I think, have an impact on us. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for today, which is Tuesday, June the 4th, 2024. Aries, you do have to be a little bit patient. I think that today things might be slower than usual. You might not get the instant feedback you're looking for. And I would suggest that you increase your timescales. So if you were expecting something to be done today, then consider the possibility that it might not perhaps be done until tomorrow or the day after. So don't get angry if there is resistance, if people want to put you on hold, if they're not ready to make decisions. It's just the way it is. And maybe, Aries, you're getting a chance to reconsider. You perhaps had some ideas about the way you wanted things to be, and you were perhaps quite excited about it. You were being very dynamic, and now you're coming to the point of action. Things have changed. No one's ready. But if you're honest with yourself, you're not ready either. So perhaps it's a good thing that you're putting a few things on hold, or at least you should be, I think, putting a few things on hold. So what do? Well, there's nothing wrong with just waiting. But also, I think that your ability to express yourself verbally is going to be very good. I understand that when you are expressing yourself verbally, nothing much is happening. You could say, well, this is just talking. We don't care about that. But talking leisurely is better than acting in haste. So you're not really wasting time by talking. You are actually biding your time. And it's also possible that through talking, you get a better understanding. yeah, you can actually prevent yourself from making a mistake by talking things out. And perhaps one area where you may feel that you're being held back is money. Maybe you were planning on spending some money today, or you had some idea about money and you were ready to put it into action. You know, you're quite impatient to put it into action. But again, you're being held back. The universe is telling you just now is not the right time. And you need to just perhaps keep that impatience to yourself and not take it out on other people. Let things happen, you know, at their own pace. Also, I should point out that the Sun is making an exact conjunction to Venus. Venus is, of course, the ruler of Libra, your opposite sign. And so that Sun conjunct Venus may represent another person. And it may be a situation where another person is completely and utterly in the right. You might feel that under normal circumstances, this person, you know, is perhaps weaker than you, is less certain than you, is less decisive than you. But right now, they get it. And maybe they get it better than you. And so in that sense, Aries, a little bit of humility might be required. Just consider the possibility that there is someone out there who is, I won't say better informed than you, but maybe is actually wiser than you. For today, I'm not saying in general wiser than you, but if they've reached a conclusion and they seem quite certain about this conclusion, then just consider, and you disagree with them, yeah, just do consider the possibility that they are right and you are wrong. No harm in that at all. And you know, don't get frustrated today. It's if things aren't happening, they're not happening for a reason. Taurus. Venus is your ruler, and it is exactly conjunct the Sun. I mean, exactly. At noon, New York, Sun is at 1431 Gemini. Venus is also at 1431 Gemini. So, as I mentioned earlier in this video, what we're dealing with here is a cazimi conjunction between the Sun and Venus. And how this might feel for you is that you might have felt that, you know, recently there might have been a little bit of uncertainty. You know, over the last couple of weeks, you know, things might have been breaking down, things that might have been getting a bit confused. You weren't quite sure what was happening. Really, perhaps ever since the Sun went into Gemini, 20th, 21st of May, whenever the Sun went into Gemini, and things were sort of breaking down and just becoming a bit difficult to work out. But just over the last couple of days, it's like things have been starting to come into focus, and the picture has been getting sharper and sharper and sharper. And now it is completely sharp, completely clear, and you see things for what they are, and it's all there, and you get a clear idea about what you're supposed to be doing, where you're coming from. That might be an important part of your clarity, because if we want to be secure in the future, we often need to be secure in the past, and many of us spend a long time trying to work out what's happened in the past, maybe even the distant past. And maybe if you think about it, there may be certain aspects from your past that are starting to really make sense now. That recently they were confusing you, but now it's all clear. And don't allow anyone to gaslight you, to tell you that no, you can't be right, you've got it wrong. No, I think, okay, I'm not 100% sure you've got it all right, but given this sort of all things being equal of this kind of astrology, I think there's a very good chance that you have got it right. And if anyone tells you otherwise, then maybe they're wrong. Okay, they could be right, but I think in most cases, I think it's you who are in the right. And with the moon making a conjunction to Uranus in your sign, that also makes you very inspired. So you see the picture, it's completely in focus, and that allows you to make the right decisions. And so I think overall, Taurus, I think you're in a really good position. Now, I should point out that there is a Mercury conjunct Jupiter today, and it is in Gemini, so that does say something about money. And I think you're going to have lots of ideas about money, and a lot of things might make a lot of sense with money, but money might be one area where you have to be a little bit careful of, simply because there seems to be a little bit of overexcitement and over enthusiasm about what can be done with money, what should be done with money. So if you start finding yourself very enthusiastic about spending money or what can be done with money, or you get feeling very optimistic about your financial prospects, then you need to temper that a bit. There may be a certain sense of exaggeration, a certain sense in which you haven't seen all the facts. So I think you do have to be aware of that, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that just overall, I think that you are getting the right answers today, and you shouldn't allow other people to tell you otherwise. And finally, in terms of relationships, if people are on your wavelength, that's fine. But I do think that certain people might try to hold you back and create delays and create questions. So don't listen too hard to what other people are saying, particularly if they're being a bit grim and are trying to hold you back, and they're trying to delay, and they're trying to force you to ask questions that you don't really want to ask. So do think for yourself and do try to be independent. I think that is the right approach. Gemini. It looks like being a pretty exciting day in many respects, because Mercury is your ruler, and it is making a conjunction. It's making a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, I have to be careful here, because I don't want to make false promises. When you're talking about Jupiter, it's this standard mistake of beginner astrologers is to get too excited about Jupiter. So, when I first started doing astrology in the 1980s, I would do written charts, and, I would come across Jupiter transits and I would get really excited about them, and, I would promise things, and it just couldn't happen. It was just hyperbole, and I don't want to give false promises. So I just be wary of that. But Mercury is conjunct Jupiter, so logically it should be a lucky day where things do go your way. Okay, I understand that Jupiter is in Gemini, which is in the sign of its detriment, but it should just still give you a certain amount of optimism. Some of that optimism may be ever so slightly unrealistic, but maybe that doesn't matter. The point is that you can think about the next step, where you're moving to next. Because Geminis can be over-analytical. They can think, what is the point? This is all a waste of time. But no need to be over-analytical. In fact, try hard not to be over-analytical, because with Mercury conjunct Jupiter, you really can start to see the world for what it is, and you can start to expand your horizons. And further, Jupiter is ruler of Sagittarius, which is your opposite sign. So Mercury conjunct Jupiter means, I think, that relationships can go as well as they can go. Now, the reason I say that is I don't want to give an unrealistic view of what can happen with relationships, because it depends on your priorities. Some people just want to know about, they want to know about love. That's it, isn't it? I mean, that's and so astrologers, I suppose, often feel they have to cater for that audience. It is always a problem. Actually, in my opinion, astrology and love don't really mix. I think that if you go to an astrologer asking about your love life, I think you're often wasting your time and you're putting pressure on the astrologer. And sure, they'll tell you something nice, but and it might feel good at the time, but is it actually going to work? Very often, if you go to an astrologer about your love life, it means there's something wrong. But I'm a Gemini. I'm talking to a Gemini. I can be honest about it, can't I? And so, having said all that, Mercury conjunct Jupiter in Gemini should be good for relationships. So, within the bounds of reality and what is possible, relationships of all kinds should work very well today because of that conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter, and also perhaps because of a conjunction between Sun and Venus, a cazimi conjunction. Venus is a planet of love. Venus is in Gemini. It is exactly conjunct the Sun in Gemini. So logically, that should be good for relationships. And as I perhaps always say, it's not just about romance. It's about friendship, partnerships, whatever relationships you feel are important. Give it your best shot. Now, I'm not saying, though, that you need to be a super mega extrovert today. The moon is in Taurus. That gives a slightly different picture. The moon does not go into Gemini until tomorrow. So with the moon in Taurus and its sextile Saturn, there is a side of you which needs to be doing things away from the public eye. In fact, in spite of everything I've said, I think your best work will be done away from the public eye. And that specifically relates, in particular, relates to the way you're trying to progress through life, maybe relating to career or business, or all the stuff you're trying to achieve. If something is really important to you, then a lot of that work should be hidden and should be focused on making sure everything is in order. So don't go completely crazy with that Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. That Mercury-Jupiter conjunction needs to be balanced by that Moon-Saturn sextile, doing things slowly, carefully, deliberately, but perhaps in a way that people can't see what you're doing, and that means they can't ask you questions. So if you get the balance right, Gemini, I do think it's going to be a great day. Cancer. You are, I think, going to have quite a good time. I'm not saying that today is going to be incredibly exciting, but I think it's going to be satisfying and, by and large, pretty useful. It would be a good time to talk to people, be with people, on your terms. Always important on your terms. You don't have to do things anyone else's way, but it's important, Cancer, that you're available. You have to be available. People need to be able to get hold of you. It's in your interests for people to be able to get hold of you, not just in your financial interests or commercial interests, but in terms of the interests of your own satisfaction and happiness. Because, you do sometimes need a little bit of variety, and I think that certain people can provide that variety. After all, the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus. The moon is ruler of Cancer, making a conjunction to Uranus. So I'm confident that things can happen, and there can be a little bit of excitement. And, that excitement, I suppose, perhaps comes from elsewhere, to an extent, but you yourself are able to deal with a high level of excitement. I don't think you're going to panic if things have to suddenly change. So if plans get changed, you will be able to deal with it. I'm fairly confident about that. And additionally, Moon is making a sextile to Saturn, and that Moon sextile Saturn should be pretty useful in terms of stabilizing relationships. There may be certain relationships that you're involved in that are a bit uncertain. You don't really know where they're going. You don't know what they're for. And today might be a good idea to just be organizing things and making sure everyone is clear. And do consider the possibility, though, that someone else can organize you. And, perhaps there's some aspect of your life that is a little bit chaotic or that you don't get. You're not sure about it. And consider the possibility that someone else can actually have an influence on you and can give you some guidance and give you support. And if you're unsure about something, don't be afraid to ask. I understand that by and large you know what you're doing, and actually Cancerians are a fairly independent-minded sign. It might not seem that to be immediately obvious, but it's true. So Cancerians do like to do things in their own way. And today, just consider the possibility that someone else knows how to do things better than you, and it might be a good idea to get their advice and even to get their structure. Someone can provide a little bit of structure for you, and I think that could be very useful. Leo, you have a Sun-Venus cazimi conjunction on your hands. Now, that Sun-Venus cazimi conjunction, assuming the cazimi theory is right, the idea that when a planet is within perhaps 17 arc minutes of the Sun, it's incredibly fortunate, and I think there is some basis for believing that theory is right. But this cazimi, this Sun-Venus cazimi conjunction, I think should really work for you. The Sun is your ruler. It is exactly conjunct Venus, so you can benefit in terms of all the significators of Venus. So Venus can be about relationships. Venus can be about money. Venus can be about aesthetics and what is beautiful. And with that Sun-Venus conjunction, suddenly things come together. You understand what looks good. You understand how to present yourself. So if you're meeting people for whatever reason, or maybe you're going for an interview, or you feel you have to get in contact with someone, you will know how to express yourself. It will be very clear. I don't think you have to think about it. You'll get the balance right. And perhaps recently you may have been a little bit overwhelming. That's possible. As the Sun-Venus conjunction was becoming close, there was something a bit difficult about Leos. Leos may have been problematic, and they just couldn't see what they were doing. They couldn't actually understand how other people were perceiving them. But now that the Sun and Venus are exactly in the same place, those kind of complications are starting to clear, and you're able to just do it right. And so if you've got important meetings or whatever you're planning on doing today, I think it can work very well. And I think it's a good day for making choices about what is beautiful, and perhaps if you've got ideas about the way things should be decorated, what you should look like, I think that should work very well. And again, it's perhaps as the Sun was moving towards the conjunction of Venus, there might be a certain tendency to have a lack of taste. Sorry, Leo, I know that you have stereotypically perhaps a high opinion of yourself, and I'm not going to tell you that you've got poor taste. but maybe just recently. But now that the Sun and Venus are exact, I think your taste is really good. Your taste is perfect today, and so perhaps you can now make choices about clothes, decoration, or whatever you're into. So that's another way in which I think that you can benefit from the Sun-Venus conjunction. And in your social life, again, that's another place where things work really well. I would encourage you to have a busy social life today, and I think you can have a powerful impact, and you will be helped by the fact that there is a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter. You're just able to be yourself, you're able to communicate, and you're able to get noticed. And your ideas for creating change, even if those changes are quite dramatic, I think will get a willing audience. People will listen to what you have to say. So if you're not happy about the way things are moving, and you might think that people are dragging their feet, or that things need to be shaken up, you can make it happen. And I think you can make it happen in such a way that you don't cause offense. I think it will be just all very natural. So overall, Leo, I think things are very smooth, and I would urge you to make the most of this Sun-Venus cazimi conjunction, because it's looking good, and it's just important not to doubt yourself. Virgo, I am being quite optimistic about a lot of the signs today. I try not to be too optimistic. I try to be realistic, and I don't want to give people false hope. But reality is that there is a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter, and Mercury is your ruler. Jupiter's a planet of good luck. The Mercury-Jupiter conjunction happens in Gemini, which is, from a Virgo perspective, is a very high-profile sign, and so I'm pretty optimistic about today, Virgo. I don't see much reason for you to have problems today. I think that you're able to get your message across very clearly, and people are going to understand what you're talking about. And I think also you're going to be able to relate very well to the world out there. And so there's a lot to look forward to today, I believe. I'm just trying to think, why might today not be such a good day? What could go wrong? Well, the only thing that could go wrong is, Mercury is conjunct Jupiter. That is a fortunate conjunction. Jupiter may at some point start to focus on the wrong things. So it's good to be enthusiastic. It's good to have a broad vision and to develop a broad vision. But I suppose Jupiter in Gemini might start to sort of focus on too many things. Oh, this could go right, this could go right, this could go right. And then you might just overload yourself. Overload yourself either in terms of having too many ideas or overthinking it. So you might have a good idea, and you think about it, and then you think about it, and then you think about it so much you start to think about the problems. And so perhaps you shouldn't be over-analytical or get overwhelmed by the facts. Try to think about the broad concept, and then I think that you'll be able to benefit in full from that Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. And I think also you shouldn't underestimate other people. Other people could actually have a restraining influence on you, but I mean that in a fortunate sense, because we've got Moon in Taurus. Remember, Moon is in Taurus. It's an earth sign. It's very sympathetic to Virgo, which is also an earth sign. Moon is in Taurus. It's sextile to Saturn. Saturn is in Pisces, which is your opposite sign. So that Moon sextile Saturn may be another person who can exercise some kind of restraining influence on you. Maybe not even a restraining influence. They can help you understand things. So perhaps if you've got all these ideas, everything is buzzing, talking it through with someone you trust could be a good exercise, because it will just help just bring things down to earth a little. And I think if you're a Virgo, bringing things down to earth is always going to be important. But don't neglect the possibility of being inspired. Inspiration is important. Virgos can sometimes focus too much on the facts and what they can see in the material detail, and they can sort of not see the bigger picture. And there is something going on today, Virgo, which I do believe is really, really inspiring and can really move you forward. Now, another thing going on is that Mercury, I've just said that Mercury is conjunct Jupiter. Mercury is also actually trine Pluto. Now, I mentioned the fact that you can benefit from another person's guidance, but don't underestimate your own ability to persuade. Mercury trine Pluto. Pluto is a planet of power and transformation and is able to get attention. And so if you need to get attention, then you will have a natural intensity. It doesn't have to be forced. You don't have to have some big power struggle. It will just be easy, because Jupiter's trine Pluto, Jupiter's conjunct Mercury and trine Pluto. It's like you can have a big influence. And it may actually be that if you really want to have a big influence today, you can have the best chance of making things happen if you can have some kind of alliance with another person. So perhaps you and someone else, or perhaps you and a group of people, can really present your ideas in a way that grabs everyone's attention and just can't be ignored. And then in the process, you can, in your own small way, change the world. Libra. So I've been talking a lot about the fact that there is a cazimi conjunction between the Sun and Venus. And of course, Venus is your ruling planet. So I think that this Sun-Venus conjunction is fortunate. You have, perhaps over the last week or more, probably since around May the 20th, 21st, been feeling perhaps a growing sense of uncertainty. You've had hope, and you've believed that things were moving your way, but at the same time you felt quite unsure of yourself, and you might have felt that you had to make a lot of effort to compromise, and you were trying to balance a lot of competing forces, including what other people were saying, what other people were wanting, and it was just getting a little bit difficult. But that was because the Sun and the Venus were getting closer and closer. But now they're close. They're not just close, they are actually with each other. They are there. And things are now becoming clear. And I think you're actually clear about what you believe in. At least it's obvious if you're honest with yourself. I understand that many Librans don't like to commit themselves. Because if you commit yourself, that might mean that half the world disagrees with you. That can be tough. But one shouldn't feel that just because you're a Libran, you have to compromise. Margaret Thatcher was a Libran. She had a moon in Leo. You don't have to compromise. And I think that with this Sun conjunct Venus today, you have an image of what is true. Now, when I say what is true, I'm not talking about some completely objective truth, but like what is true for you. And I think that your basic core philosophy is right in front of you. And if it feels right, it is right. Now, you might be in denial a bit, thinking like, do I really believe that? God, is that me? I can't believe that. I can't, it's not possible for me to believe that, but just accept it. That is part of a process of ideological change. Okay, it can be spiritual change, but we all have to change. And what you believe in is right in front of you. And so I would just encourage you to accept it. Okay, unless what you believe in is completely crazy. But who am I to tell you what is crazy? Craziness is kind of a very subjective view, isn't it? But I'm not going to give examples because I don't want to get myself into trouble. But so it is clear, and I think that clarity will make things a lot simpler, because once you've got a clear sense of what you believe in, it's going to make life a lot easier, because it's just easier to make decisions. If you don't have a clear sense of what you believe in, then every time you have to make a decision about something, you have to go through all these arguments, and you have to work out, what's true and what's not. But if you've got an underlying philosophy, it all becomes straightforward. And I do think that the Sun-Venus conjunction is revealing to you some kind of underlying philosophy. And you don't have to worry too much about what other people are saying or thinking or doing. In fact, if you were to spend too long worrying about other people and their impact on you, well, that could really slow you down. I think actually right now some people are just being quite difficult. They just want to come up with objections. They're not being as straightforward as they should be. Maybe they're trying to drag their feet. They're trying to delay. So don't get wrapped up in the world of other people. Because you know the answers, and you should just accept that you know the answers. And I should also point out that right now you're able to really make things happen. Absolutely able to make things happen. So Libra, believe it or not, you are in a very strong position. Scorpio. Now, don't spoil things for other people. I mean, it is a good day. And a lot of people, I think, are having a good day. But Scorpio, you don't want to be the one that makes things not happen. Because I think, Scorpio, a negative streak is coming to the surface here. And I think that you're coming up with reasons why things shouldn't happen. And you seem to be quite keen to hold on to the status quo. Even though that status quo may have passed its sell-by date, you have to accept that we need to have change. If you don't change, then you're going to get stagnation. And so you can't hang on to something forever. You have to be ready to be, just a little bit flexible. I'm just slightly worried that Scorpios might just come up with reasons why something can't change. And if other people want to change, want to do stuff, you might, almost without thinking about it, do things which might hold them back. So just be aware of that. And, once you're aware of that, then I think you can start to really handle today, and you can start to perhaps be able to make the most of today. And I think one thing that's going on today is, there's a conjunction between Moon and Uranus in Taurus. It's in your opposite sign. And I think you should ask yourself, how can other people have an impact on you which is fortunate? I know you want to be in control, but maybe other people have got something to offer, and you need to perhaps be able to try to work out what's being offered. Yeah, you can benefit from other people, but I think it has to be on their terms, not on your terms. And okay, I'm not asking you to completely compromise. I'm not asking you to show weakness. I'm just asking you to have an open mind and just to consider what other people have to offer, because I really do think that they do have a great deal to offer. And this is going to sort of happen on many different levels. And you have to perhaps look at yourself and perhaps look at where you've been holding yourself back, and perhaps just seeing what examples are being given to you in the outside world. And if someone is doing something better than you, rather than get annoyed, just be able to learn from the experience. Now, I'm really, sorry to be a bit negative, and I'm not trying to preach. I'm just trying to, be constructive here. And from a work point of view, if you're working, or not just work, but just the whole way in which you're trying to move forward with your life, there are good reasons actually to be optimistic. You do have a chance to really understand what's happening in terms of work, career, business, and it's starting to actually make sense if you allow it to make sense. That might mean having to accept things that you don't want to accept, but you're really able to get to the bottom of things, perhaps with another person's help, and you can get to the bottom of things and just understand what needs to be done. And okay, a little bit of self-criticism may be necessary. You are also perhaps becoming aware of some mistakes you've made in the past. But once you get to the bottom of things, once you have that ruthless self-honesty, then I think it'll be very clear what needs to be done. And yes, that self-honesty is important. With self-honesty comes the chance of real success. Sagittarius. Jupiter is your ruler, and yesterday we had Jupiter trine Pluto. And if you remember from yesterday, if you were listening to me yesterday, I suggested that Jupiter trine Pluto is very much about self-improvement. You don't have to be satisfied with the way things were in the past, or even the way things are now. They can be changed. And Sagittarius, you are without doubt in a position to make those changes. So don't rest on your laurels. And however good things are, things could certainly be better. And today, Mercury makes a trine to Pluto. Mercury makes a conjunction to Jupiter. So what's actually happening is that Mercury is triggering that Jupiter-Pluto trine. So arguably, the Jupiter-Pluto trine, because of the Mercury trigger, is stronger today than it was yesterday. So you really need to push it. You need to have a busy day. You need to really pack it in. And so, Sagittarius, do consider where you've been falling short. We're all falling short somewhere. Ask yourself, where have you been falling short? Where can you make improvements? Because, I'm fairly confident that there is something you can do to make things even better. It may be the case that you can make these improvements with another person's help, because Mercury is ruler of Gemini, which is your opposite sign. And so with Mercury conjunct Jupiter, you may get some advice. You may be actually told where you can make improvements. So if you want constructive criticism, go ask someone. I suppose it's kind of like some of these self-improvement, self-development courses people go on, these mass courses where people pile into have these weekend intensive self-development seminars, and part of it is getting people to, for some of it, sometimes you're supposed to criticize your neighbor or something like that. You're criticizing each other because it's a good exercise. Maybe it's that kind of thing. Get some criticism. Ask someone for some constructive criticism. See what happens. Ask someone, what do they really think of you? What do they think you're doing wrong? Something like that. See what happens, because something could be even better. And it's just so important that you're not complacent. Though on a more sort of day-to-day level, with this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, I'm fairly confident that relationships can work well. And for relationships to work well, I think it's just important that you accept people for what they are. You don't bring too much of your material to the table. You don't want to impose yourself on anyone. In terms of relationships, if you're trying to get closer to someone, you perhaps should make an effort to try to see what the other person has got to offer. The reason I'm saying that is because Jupiter is in Gemini, and so Jupiter is your ruler. It is in Gemini. Maybe there's a certain tendency to perhaps to talk too much, or to get sidetracked by irrelevant detail. And perhaps instead you should just consider, what has someone else got to offer? Try to accept someone for what they are and not feel you have to do all the talking. But I think if you get it right, then I think that you can have, you can really strengthen relationships, perhaps find new relationships. So that's all looking good. Though we can't avoid the fact that the moon is sextile Saturn, and that does give a slightly different feel to what's happening today. And it may be that there is something that does need a little bit of work in quite a routine, almost boring kind of way, but it shouldn't take too much of your time, but just making sure that everything is well organized. I think that if you are trying to improve yourself, then it can't be done in a completely haphazard way. You have to consider, what are you trying to improve? And is the thing that you're trying to improve properly organized? So do give that some consideration. Capricorn. It's a question perhaps today of live and let live. Different people have different priorities. It's not really a question of anyone being right and wrong. Just many people are having a great day, I believe, because there's Mercury is conjunct Jupiter, and there's a cazimi conjunction between the Sun and Venus, and you do need to just accept that and not feel that you have to interfere. And from your perspective, I think it's in many ways a case of looking after yourself. You've got things that you want to do. There are things you're good at. Other people might not understand what you're trying to do, but that's okay. And by the same token, when you're looking at what other people are doing, you might not understand what they're trying to do. And so don't jump to conclusions. It's just important to be tolerant, and it goes back to what I was saying about live and let live. Though, there is a sextile between Moon and Saturn today, and with that sextile between Moon and Saturn, I think that if you're patient and tolerant, then I think that things should run well. I think that you and other people will have a good connection with each other. I think that you can be prepared to offer someone support and help, provided that you're not judgmental. Very important not to be judgmental today, as I've already suggested. So you're there for someone, you provide support, you perhaps provide support for their creativity, for what they're trying to achieve. But if you are going to give people support, if possible, it should be on their terms. It's not about you imposing your ideas onto them. So I do think that is tremendously important. Now, going back to yourself, there is this conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter, and it is trine Pluto. And I actually think that it could be quite useful for you. I think that this conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter, trine Pluto, does allow you to sort yourself out on perhaps a financial level, an administrative level. So if there's anything about organization, administration, and finance that's not working as well as it should be working, then I think that you can take prompt action, and I think you'll be able to cover a lot of ground very quickly. And if something is, you've been uncertain about it, you can give yourself clarity, and you can actually create a machine, sort of metaphorical machine that works really well. And that's how Capricorns like it. They like things to be all organized, all the parts of the administrative and financial machine to be well oiled and to be working. And that's something you can do. So perhaps you can address yourself to the machine, the administrative machine, and make sure that it's all in order. And that's something you can do. And I don't think you're going to need anyone else's help. Aquarius. You are an air sign, and right now, as I said yesterday, there is a lot of stuff in air. You've got 5 planets in air signs, and we've got 2 conjunctions in air signs. We've got a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, and we have got a Sun-Venus conjunction also in Gemini, and those 2 conjunctions have a trine relationship to Aquarius, which is your sign. And so because of that, I think that things really should run smoothly for you. I think that today you're going to be very clever, and I think that you're also going to get into a connection with your creative genius. Whatever it is that makes you special. What does make you special? You don't have to be too objective, too modest. Consider, what is it that makes you special? Because it's just important you think about that, because once you realize what makes you special, you can then realize what you should be concentrating on at the moment. Those 2 conjunctions are very powerful, and the fact that they come together in Gemini means that you have a chance to really bring forward whatever it is that makes you special and what makes you unique. And you don't have to do that in a way that is obnoxious, that upsets anyone. First of all, you have the first person that needs to appreciate and recognize your specialness is actually you. It's not other people that have to recognize it. It's about you identifying that. And I do really think that that is what you can do today. And it's just about, exercising your core ability and not your core abilities, and perhaps not asking too many questions. And while this is going on, it might be a good idea to question some core foundational assumptions. So you may have made some assumptions about yourself and who you are and what you're supposed to be doing. And some of those assumptions may actually be quite limiting. Your assumptions may have actually restricted yourself in terms of what you can do. And today, by questioning those assumptions, you're loosening things up, and you're then perhaps able to take advantage of the flexibility and the opportunity that all those Gemini planets are bringing to bear. Mercury in Gemini, Jupiter in Gemini, Sun in Gemini, Venus in Gemini. And in the process, Aquarius, I think it's just important that you don't take yourself too seriously. Aquarians can take themselves too seriously. It's sometimes forgotten that Aquarius is a sign that's ruled by Saturn. And today, you perhaps need to sort of tune into some of your childlike innocence and wonder. Nothing wrong with that. Not feeling you have to get everything absolutely right. Allowing yourself a possibility of making small mistakes, allowing yourself a possibility of maybe even embarrassing yourself. But the key point is that there's something experimental going on, because you're trying to tune into what is special to you. Remember, it's just not about being judged by the outside world. Though there is this cazimi conjunction between the Sun and Venus, and it is in the fifth house. The fifth house is, to use the jargon, the fifth house is, because it's the fifth house from Gemini is the fifth house from Aquarius. Aquarius 1, Pisces 2, Aries 3, Taurus 4, Gemini 5. And so with that Sun-Venus conjunction in the fifth house, that is about fun. And it might be about fun with another person. So you and another person can really enjoy yourselves together. I don't know who that other person is. It might be someone you've just met. It might be a partner, a spouse. Just consider what you and another person can do. And it's just important to enjoy yourself, because it is, this fifth house is about enjoyment. And it's not about asking too many questions. It's not about being self-conscious. It's just also being quite spontaneous. And so you don't want to be too saturnine about it. You don't want to be too obsessed with a set of rigid foundational strictures. You don't want that. You just want to just enjoy yourself. And if you can just enjoy yourself, then in a way you'll be able to tune into what makes you special. Pisces, you are quite focused on yourself and your own part of the world, where you are standing. I mean, this all happens because we've got a lot of planets in Gemini, and Gemini is, from a Pisces perspective, is quite a grounded sign. And you've got Mercury conjunct Jupiter in Gemini, Sun conjunct Venus in Gemini. You don't have to be out there in the world. It's not necessary for you to get attention. In fact, if you were to be out there in the world, in the spotlight, it's quite possible that your impact would be watered down. because you'd have to focus too much on what other people want, what you're supposed to be doing, and you might not have time for yourself. So maybe today it's just important to give yourself time and space and not feel that you have any real obligations. And you can really benefit today from a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter. So Jupiter's your ruler, Mercury is conjunct Jupiter. So Mercury's in Gemini. It's strongly placed in Gemini, and I think that Mercury conjunct Jupiter, it gives you lots of ideas. It might give you ideas about your own home and about houses and property and what you want to do with property in general, even if you don't own property. If I don't know, depends on what your relationship to property actually is. But it does give you lots of ideas and lots of thoughts about what can be done with your living space. So to make it mundane, down to earth. So you might have seen your living space in a particular way for a long time, and now you see it in a different way, and you see ideas in which your living space can actually be used. That might be that you can maybe profit from your living space, or your living space can be a place, where you can make money and be commercially successful, for example. Or it can be about just feeling comfortable and grounded and satisfied with the world as it is. So in a way, your attention should be should be focused on yourself and your own little part of the world, and not worry too much about what is going on out there. Though it's very important that you don't rest on your laurels. I think I mentioned this yesterday, I mentioned the fact that Jupiter's trine your Pluto. Jupiter's trine Pluto. Jupiter is still trine Pluto. Arguably, the Jupiter trine Pluto of yesterday is even stronger today because Mercury is conjunct Jupiter and Mercury is trine Pluto. So there's a trigger there. And so although I've suggested to you that you don't spend too much time worrying about what's going on out there, that doesn't mean to say that you haven't got the ability to have an influence on what's going on out there. You're probably more influential than you realize. And with Mercury trine Pluto, you can have an influence. And people will listen to you if you make the effort. And you don't have to put too much effort into it. Sorry, I've just contradicted myself. If you make the effort, but you don't want to make the effort, what do I mean by that? By that, I'm saying you have to make the effort in terms of wanting something to happen. That requires some effort. But once you make a decision, you don't want to make it too contrived. It has to be natural. It has to seem effortless. That's what I mean by that. You start the process and you can effortlessly persuade people that that your way is the right way. And I think that the Mercury conjunct Jupiter trine Pluto is really going to help there. Though I suppose it works both ways. That Mercury conjunct Jupiter, that Mercury could represent another person, and another person who could have an influence on you. And that's okay for someone else to have an influence on you, provided that other person has their heart in the right place. So if you find that someone is trying to influence you, just ask yourself, what is their motive? What are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to help you, or are they just concentrating on their own agenda? If you think that they're trying to help you, or if you and someone else have the same priorities, then that's fine. You can be influenced, and I think you can benefit from another person's influence. So you just have to look at the situation and decide whether or not you're dealing with someone you can trust. And really, that's it for today. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to consider today from the view of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 53. And 53 is about development. Things moving slowly, but definitely moving. We're engaged in something which is working well, and I think that the I Ching has the image of a goose flying higher and higher, slowly reaching its goal. And we are like that goose, slowly moving towards where we want to go. This hexagram of development does have a connection with relationships. Remembering that today there is a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter, and that Mercury-Jupiter conjunction for many of us may indicate new relationships or developing relationships. I understand that's particularly the case for Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, Pisces, but I think for all 12 signs, really, it can have implications for relationships. So something is moving, and it seems that with the fifth line moving, it's like we may feel that there's been a period when nothing has happened. We've been trying to get something together, and it hasn't worked. And then finally, with this fifth line, in the end, there is action. So after perhaps a long delay, we get the result, something we've been trying to create but haven't succeeded in creating. And the image actually that the I Ching gives for development is childbirth. The image it gives is of a woman trying to have a child, and it's taking a long time. It's actually the time it gives is 3 years. 3 years of trying for a child, and that hasn't worked. And then finally, after 3 years, nothing can stop it, and the child is born. And I suppose the child is symbolic of something that we are trying to create that has been difficult to create. It just hasn't worked, and it's 3 years. It's a long time. One has perhaps almost given up on the matter, and then suddenly the creation is possible, and that's the fifth line. And going back to the image of the goose approaches the mountaintop. It gets there. So development, it's about something that just takes a long time, but in the end it reaches its destination. And so if today you've been in a situation where you're feeling a bit frustrated that something hasn't happened, or you've been working on something and you just haven't got results, it's really suggesting don't give up. Keep going. You're actually closer than you think to achieving, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And this hexagram 53 development, it does move, and it moves to hexagram 52, which is keeping still. And it seems that is it. We have reached our destination, and then that's it. We've done it, and we need to keep still. There is another slightly more sinister interpretation of keeping still, and that is the I Ching is talking about a situation where the enemy have advanced and the enemy have captured the city and whatever, but they don't touch us. Somehow they ignore us. We keep still. So in certain situations, we may be faced with something we're a little bit afraid of, and I don't know what it is. Something that concerns us. What if we're discovered? That might be a concern. And if we're concerned about being discovered, I don't know what that situation might be. You'll have to work it out for yourself. So if you are in a situation where you are afraid of being discovered, then the advice is simple: keep still. I think there was, I was reading, what was it, in one of Aleister Crowley's autobiography. I think he called it an auto-hagiography. Only Aleister Crowley would say that he was writing an auto-hagiography. A hagiography is, of course, a biography of a saint, but only Crowley would write an auto-hagiography. And I think he described a situation where he was in Calcutta trying to escape from people. I don't know quite what he... and he said he hid in the shadows and he did the sign of silence. I think the sign of silence is like this: you put your finger on your lips, and he kept still, and he whatever is the mob or whoever was trying to get him just ran past him. And so that's like keeping still. You keep still and the danger just passes. So that is another dimension to this hexagram. But overall, the I Ching looks pretty favourable. Development transitions to keeping still. So I think it looks like being an okay day. And maybe things, something just in general, something we thought is not going to happen, we can actually make it happen today. So that is a possibility. So now I want to turn to the astrology, and I wanted to look at two presidential suns. And the first presidential sun I wanted to look at was Barron Trump. So I have already looked at Barron Trump, but I just did want to look at his chart again, with particular reference to his father. So here is Barron Trump's horoscope, and I've just pointed out that he's got Neptune conjunct his sun at the moment, and it must be really difficult for him. He's holed up with his mother Melania, and his father has got all these legal issues. Just who knows what is going through his mind. And he hasn't just got Neptune conjunct his sun. He's just got as we know, he's got this new moon on Thursday is going to be conjunct his Mars. And plus, from a solar arc direction perspective, here are his solar arc directions. Barron Trump, solar arc directed Uranus is on his sun. So when he was born, Uranus you can see how Uranus is about 18 degrees off his sun. So this is another of those situations where you can see by eye that something big could happen when he's 18. Now, graduating from high school, I don't think so, because everyone graduates from high school in America at around 18. But in this case, it's some kind of shock, and I think maybe that what's going on with his father, I think is having a big impact on him. People, Trump was saying how it's very tough on Melania. Donald Trump is saying it's tough on Melania. But what about Barron? I think that this Uranus on his sun, I think it's really, really difficult. Now, I wanted to just make some observations about Barron Trump's chart and his father's chart. Now, one thing that is interesting, here's Donald Trump's chart, but one thing that's interesting about Donald Trump's chart is he has no planets in Earth. Nothing. You can see Virgo empty, Taurus, Virgo empty, Gemini empty, I've come up with some reasons, some manifestations of his no planets in Earth. I think he's obsessed about money. And arguably he's been so successful, so obsessed about money, he's actually damaged himself financially. I think it's been said that if he had taken everything his father had given him, and he had just put it in a stock market tracker, he'd be richer than he is now. So basically, all his business deals and whatever haven't enriched him at all compared to what he should have done if he just put all his money in the stock market and just done passively, just left it be, and just put it in a stock market tracker. I don't know what trackers were available a few decades ago when he got the money, but that's what he should have done. So his obsession with money may actually have cost him money. Also, he was the first president almost since recorded history not to have pets, not to have animals, and somehow that links with his lack of earth in his chart, and his reaction when that dog, that there was some ceremony where some military dog got an award when he was president. It was incredible just watching how afraid, nervous Trump was of this getting anywhere close to this dog. And I think it was Mike Pence that had to deal with the matter. There's pictures of Mike Pence petting this dog. Apparently Mike Pence was into rabbits. Is that right? I don't know. So that's Donald Trump's lack of earth. And now turning to Barron Trump, same thing. Barron Trump, like his father, has no planets in Earth. And apparently Barron Trump actually wanted a dog. I've heard that he did want a dog. Someone said that, and his parents said no. You can imagine the reasons. I would have thought maybe Donald Trump is not really into dogs because he has no Melania. He probably doesn't want the complications of having a dog. Maybe the dog would get sort of muddy footprints on the pristine white carpet or whatever. So he doesn't have he doesn't have any earth, and it'd just be interesting to see how that works out with his lack of earth. Is he going to be obsessed with money? That's one possibility. Is he not going to care about money? That's another way in which a lack of earth can work. A lack of earth can also can make one very creative in certain situations, because if you have a lack of earth, you're not tied to the existing way of doing things, and you can sort of float free. So that's another way in which a lack of earth can work. So that does fit his. Well, we don't know if it fits, but that is something just interesting. It's like Donald Trump. His son's born at a time when, March 2006, when the elements resonate with Trump's own chart. Now, I talked at the beginning of this video about the 4th house and the 10th house. Is the 4th house the mother? Is the 10th house the mother? What is it? So I think it's interesting that Barron Trump's IC is 22 degrees 1 minute Gemini. So let's just compare his chart with his father's chart. So we'll put Barron Trump in the middle. We'll put his father's chart on the outer wheel. And there we have it. So Barron Trump's in the middle. So Trump's sun is at 22. Donald Trump's sun is at 2256 Gemini. He's got Donald Trump has North Node at 20 degrees Gemini, Sun at 22 degrees Gemini. So the IC represents, I would have said, his father, because the degree of Barron Trump's IC is the same as the degree of his father's sun, and so that does, that really does, I think, support the idea that the IC is the father. Of course, I don't want to be totally doctrinaire about this, by the way. I'm not saying in all cases the 4th house is the father. I don't think there's any reason to be doctrinaire about it, but I think that this one example supports the case for treating the fourth house as the father. In terms of a mother, well, maybe Melania is Pluto on the midheaven. I mean, I don't know, but you think of this as a protective, controlling mother. Clearly, the relationship between mother and son is very strong in the case of Barron Trump. So yeah, I just wanted to have another look at Barron Trump's chart. Finally, just one other chart I did want to consider, and that's the chart of what's going on in his life when on the day of a presidential election. Presidential election, Jupiter's at 20 degrees Gemini. So in other words, Jupiter is going to be very close to his IC, and that's a reminder that Jupiter, so that's Jupiter, IC could be the father. So Jupiter on the IC, does that mean success of the father? Donald Trump will, of course, have Jupiter conjunct his sun within 2 degrees at the time of the election. Remember, Jupiter's at 20 degrees for Gemini, and Donald Trump's there's his north node, his sun. Jupiter, yeah, I mean, we shouldn't forget that. If, in terms of the election, if I was a new astrologer and I'd been studying astrology for a couple of weeks and I didn't know anything about, about the history of what's going on in America, and I was to make a prediction, I would say, oh, it's simple. He's got Jupiter on his sun at the time of the election, therefore Trump is going to win the election. Therefore. So, that would be simple astrology. Simple beginner's astrology, I think you would say that Trump would win. But as I said, I'm not ready to make a commitment yet. I don't think I'll ever make a commitment about who I think is going to win. It's just but I think that's just interesting that Trump is going to have Jupiter on his sun at the time of the election, and Barron Trump is going to have Jupiter on his IC. Okay, so now I want to switch to the other presidential son, which is, of course, Hunter Biden. I don't want to say much about Hunter Biden. I've looked at his chart before, but he is coming to trial. So its jury selection is Monday, so that would be yesterday now. But so jury selection starts January the 3rd, yeah, and so it's something to do with firearms, isn't it? And he's got Mars opposition Uranus. I mean, Mars opposition Uranus can be about firearms, problems with firearms, and he's got Mars-Uranus opposition in his chart. Now, primarily, that Mars-Uranus opposition, I would, as far as I'm concerned, that's simply about his mother's death. When he was 2 years old, there was that. In December 1972, there was that accident where him and his brother Beau and his were seriously injured. His mother was killed. His sister was killed, and so perhaps that Mars-Uranus opposition just completely dominates who he is. But Mars-Uranus opposition, yeah, it can be about firearms, and now he seems to be in trouble with firearms, which made me think about what was actually going on in 2018, when he took possession of that firearm. So I think he owned the firearm for about 12 days or something like that, and then his girlfriend, or whoever the woman was with, took this firearm and threw it in a garbage or something like that, threw it in a tip, or because she didn't think he should, she didn't think he was in a fit state to have a gun. And I think this was a moment when Biden took possession of the gun, when Hunter Biden took possession of the gun on October the 12th. I think it was October the 12th, 2018. I've said it for Wilmington, Delaware. And Sun-Pluto square when that happened. Now, how does that fit with his natal chart? So this is his natal chart in the middle, and this is the day he got the gun, when he was apparently in a really bad state of mind. I suppose he just had Saturn on his descendant, so perhaps issues with his partner, with his girlfriend. I mean, that's not very nice, throwing someone's gun away. Doesn't matter his state of mind, you know. If she throws away his gun, okay, Saturn is not exactly on his not exactly on his descendant, but it's fairly close. And there's his Mercury in the 8th house. There's a bit of a problem, Mercury in the 8th house, all sorts of crazy stuff going on there. And Pluto is on his Mercury, and the Sun is square his Mercury. Now, it's a little more complicated than that when we consider hypothetical planets. So remember, I was talking at the beginning of this video, I was talking about the hypothetical planet Zeus, and I was connecting the hypothetical planet Zeus with firearms. So going back to the chart of when Hunter Biden got his gun. Now, if we put hypothetical planets on that chart, and we just see what's happening there. So let's put the hypothetical planets there. You see, there was an exact conjunction between Sun and Zeus. Zeus, the planet of firearms, was there when he took delivery of this gun, when he took it home. And this Zeus was square Pluto, so he had a Sun Zeus conjunction square Pluto. He had that Sun Zeus conjunction was square his natal Mercury. He had Pluto on his natal Mercury. So I suppose Sun Zeus conjunction, you know, just getting off on this gun. I mean, it's just an obsessive, strange thing. He just needs to have this gun. So I thought the presence of Zeus was quite interesting there. Then we need to consider the trial is starting, isn't it? It's happening. So this is the positions of the planet. I don't know what time the trial starts. I assume it's in Wilmington, Delaware. I mean, I've just gone for 9 a.m. It's not going to make a big difference. So that's what's happening. With the jury selection. Let's just compare that with Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden trial to see if anything's going on. I'm not actually saying it necessarily is going on. So we've got Hunter Biden in the middle and the trial on the outer wheel. And I don't think that it's necessarily having a huge impact on him. He's got there's his North Node at 12 Pisces. Sun and Venus are making a square to that North Node. I'm not convinced that is a particularly big deal. Chiron is square his moon, and I think I don't think I've got a great deal to report there. And if you actually look at Hunter Biden's solar arc directions, there is a case for saying that the craziness of Hunter Biden is actually a little bit in the past. So here are Hunter Biden's solar arc directions. Remember, moving everything 1 degree for 1 year. So I've set his solar arc directions for sort of yesterday, June the 3rd, but they don't move very, very quickly. And, Okay, Jupiter is about to cross his descendant. That is true. But that won't happen for another year. Saturn is about to cross his ascendant. That doesn't happen for 4 years. Now, look at Neptune. Neptune was at 25 degrees Capricorn, and his natal moon is at 23 Capricorn. So solar arc directed Neptune has actually crossed his moon about 2 years ago. And so maybe Hunter Biden's peak confusion was already a couple of years ago. And look at his midheaven, assuming we've got an accurate time of birth here. Directed midheaven is at 3 degrees 17 Taurus, and that 3 degrees 17 Taurus is, well, it's conjunct his Saturn, it's true. So he's got midheaven conjunct the Saturn right now at the time he goes to trial. So it's pretty exact, but it is slightly beyond exact. So maybe some of his difficulties are moving into the past. I look at the Sun, there's his Mars. And so the Sun, it was nearly 2 years ago that directed Sun was over his Mars. So you could argue, if you want to be sympathetic to Hunter Biden, that his solar arc directions would indicate that certainly some of his psychological issues, maybe he's getting over them. I don't know. I don't think one wants to just be negative for the sake of it. Now, I want to finish this video by looking at Hunter Biden's Vedic chart. So here is his Vedic chart. The things are, slightly different with in a Vedic chart. They're sort of put in a different place. So there he is, February the 4th, 1970, 1346, Wilmington, Delaware. And with his Vedic chart, we notice that he is in his Jupiter Dasha. And now his Jupiter is in his 5th house. And you could say Jupiter in the 5th house is quite fortunate, although Jupiter is his weakest planet. Though that's one point to make about Jupiter. And but it is in the 5th. 5th is quite fortunate, but Jupiter receives an opposition from Saturn. So it's very mixed, his Jupiter Dasha. I would say, and that seems to be how it works. Now, his Jupiter Dasha, remember, Indian astrology divides life up into 9 distinct periods, and you add these periods up all together and it comes to 120 years, so that's a lifespan. And so the Jupiter Dasha lasts for 16 years, and it started on May the 14th, 2009. Now, critics of Biden and of the Bidens might find that very interesting, because they might say, something changed for him when his father became vice president. What changed for him? Well, maybe doors started to open. He could, for example, move on to the board of that Ukrainian energy company. Was it Busama? I got that right, something like that. And I think he was paid $1 million a year. Suddenly these opportunities emerge because of his father's influence, or his father's perceived influence. And this all started in 2009 when he became vice president. And so you might then say, well, that would last for 16 years. And so let's move forward 16 years. That takes us to May 2025, which is 4 months, February, March. That's 4 months after potentially a new president gets sworn in. So if you're hoping that Trump wins, maybe an argument there. It could be that Hunter Biden's luck changes early next year, perhaps as a result of a presidential election, and he moves into his Saturn Dasha. And his Saturn is in Saturn starts becoming very strong. It's in Aries, the sign of its fall, and it makes an opposition to Jupiter. So there is an argument here, indirectly, that one could look at Hunter Biden's chart and come up with a case for Biden about to leave the White House. I have to think about this. I'm just speculating here. And one final thing I want to point out is there's this thing in, now to be positive again, or sort of positive, there's this thing in Indian astrology called Sadhisati. Now, Sadhisati is when Saturn moves into the sign in Indian astrology which is immediately before your moon, which is your moon itself, and is a sign after your moon. So Hunter Biden has his moon in Capricorn. In fact, he has his moon in Capricorn in the Western zodiac and in the Eastern zodiac as well. And so the sign before the moon sign is Sagittarius. The moon sign itself is Capricorn, and the moon sign following that is Aquarius. So the Sadhisati period would be when the Saturn was transiting through Sagittarius, Capricorn and Aquarius. Now, that is a massive period of time. And the argument against Sadhisati is all of us spend a quarter of our lives in a Sadhisati period. And the Sadhisati period doesn't always work. It's not always particularly problematic. But I think there's some evidence for Hunter Biden. Sadhisati has actually hit him quite powerfully. His Saturn went into Sagittarius approximately in 2017. Remember, I'm talking about sidereal Sagittarius using the Lari Ayanamsha, and so I think that you could say that that's when it started. And so remember, he got into all this trouble with his gun. What was he doing with his gun? That was in October 2012, and that was in his Sadhisati period. And this Sadhisati period continues right through until March 29th, 2025, which is beginning of next year, when his father may or may not be president. So this Sadhisati period is roughly between 2017 and 2025. And this is just a period where everything is upside down, where there's a lot of bad luck, where things go wrong. Remember, not all of us have to deal with 7 years of bad luck like this. But in Hunter Biden's case, there is some evidence that this is actually going on. And so, yeah, his Sadhisati period does finish in March. And so maybe that is evidence that some of these problems will start to resolve themselves early next year. So that's it with Hunter Biden. I hope you found this. I hope you found this video of some interest, and thank you very much for listening. And if you want to like this video, I would be really grateful. If you're not subscribed and you like this video, I'd be really grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.